Welcome back, and we have Bob Vayner here, the very best water system in the world. And I tell you, I'm sitting with a glass of my pure water system water, and I have Brain Mag and our new product, which is the Sports Energy Lights in there. And I'll tell you, my cells are giving me high fives and saying, great water, great drink. Sports Energy Lights and Brain Mag together. Wow, what a combination. Now, if you're out there thinking, I want to preserve my health, I want to stay well, as they say, healthy, wealthy, and wise, well, if you're not drinking pure water system water, you're drinking Berkey water, you're drinking any other water system, you're nuts, because you're not taking out all the toxins, and you're listening to people who are not experts on environmental medicine, and you're going to be giving, as they say in the old parlance, a pig in a poke. You're being told things by non-experts, things that are basically marketing lies, and you're poisoning yourself with biotoxins. And you wonder why there's what I call a mitochondrial apocalypse and omnicide of the planet. It's because the very first and most important thing you do is how much water do you put in your body every day. And if you have a greenhouse at home, making sure your water is filtered too before you put it in your greenhouse. So, Bob, tell us about why the pure water system really doesn't have any competition. This is basically, it started off as lab water. If you do a lab experiment, you don't want to have any contaminants, so the lab experiment is invalid. You don't want even 1 or 2 parts per million of heavy metals, volatile chemicals, or toxins, biotoxins, things that will interfere with your thyroid function or cause cancer, gradually bioaccumulate in your brain, liver, heart, kidneys, bone marrow. And when people say, how did I get cancer? How did you not? I mean, I don't understand how. Human beings must be part cockroach. How do they survive all the biotoxins? And they're not actually, because human fertility is dropping. Males are being feminized with bisphenol A and xenotoxins. We're getting more and more autism. I did a consult this morning for a young lady. Her name is Raina, a little sweet girl, 10 years old, with pervasive developmental disorder, autism. And when I went to medical school, there was 1 in 3,600 plus people got autism. It was literally a major case rounds. That's 40 years ago, 42 years ago when I went to medical school, I graduated in 1977 and my residency in 1980. Since then, and across the country, it's 1 person in 68 with autism, and in some cities, it's 1 in 24 children has autism. Do you think it might be partly because of the water they're drinking? Maybe. Absolutely it is. It's one of the factors, along with GMO food, stacked toxic vaccines, radiotoxins from Fukushima is not going to help the next couple of years because you're going to see a massive increase. And if you're drinking regular water and being told by the marketers of any alternative system, you're poisoning yourself. I guess the big question I'd ask, and I like to axe lots of questions to people, as I say, there's no such thing as a stupid question, but you might not like my answer. The question is, how many toxins do you like to put in your body every day? And if the answer is none, you're smart. And if you think that, well, I can tolerate 10,000 toxins of parts per million or higher, you're going to kill yourself, and it's going to leave a mark, and it's going to hurt first before it makes your days miserable and shortened. So, Bob, tell us about the pure water system. What makes it so superior? The Bev 100 countertop, Bev 300 under the counter, the whole house system, and the tackle box Bev 200 system. These are amazing. There's just no comparison with any other water system on the planet. It really is remarkable.
Hi, Dr. Bill. Always a pleasure to be on with you and your listeners. I was just up in Seattle this week servicing one of my lab customers, and they're so delighted because I got the system set up so it's just totally bomb-proof, fail-safe, works like a charm. 1 year between service, and those guys use water way more than a residential is going to use water, and The system just works. That's the great thing about our design. It just works. It just, once the thing's installed, we're talking about an under-the-counter model. In the laboratory that I'm serviced, I use the exact same under-the-counter model that I use for everybody else for all our residential systems. The only difference is my deionization vessels are bigger. And we use the same deionization resins. So it's a little different. It's got an ultraviolet light. Laboratories require some redundancy that residences don't require. We have a 0.2 micron filter in our residential system to capture bacteria system virus, so we never have to use an ultraviolet light. But in a lab system, they require some redundancy. But the system just works. And so it's the same thing. that I'm using in that lab, and those guys are getting 10 to 18 meg water in their system, and that's the same thing we do in our residential systems. This is ultra pure water. This is free of all possible contaminants that are going to that could show up in the drinking water. And so it doesn't matter if it's radioactivity from Fukushima, or if you live someplace in the Rocky Mountains where you've got a lot of radioactivity, uranium deposits. The pure water system takes it out. Doesn't matter if you live in farm country and you've got all kinds of nitrates, nitrites from fertilizer in your water. Pure water system takes it out. Doesn't matter if you live in an industrial area or Love Canal, for God's sakes, up in New Jersey or someplace in New York where they've had industrial dumping going on for more than 100 years. Pure water system takes out all those chemicals. There's no other system out there that's going to be as effective at removing every different kind of contaminant than the pure water system. And why? Because it's designed just like our laboratory systems, just scaled down for residential use. Nobody else does that. You couldn't take a Berkey and use it in a laboratory. You couldn't. That water wouldn't qualify as pure enough to run experiments with. You couldn't use, a distiller. A distiller can be, but man, you don't want to use a distiller. Those things suck so much energy off the grid just to make a gallon of water. Most of them will use 800 to 1,200 watts, and you have to cook the water for, usually 2 to 4 hours just to get 1 gallon of water. And so you don't want a distiller that can be effective, but even with a distiller, you've got to have carbon filtration after the distillation process, because volatile organic compounds, VOCs, will rise up with the vapor and they'll condense with the vapor.
Just what I was going to say.
Have that in your water.
In other words, it doesn't get rid of them. You still have to use a post distillation filter, and that isn't even fully effective, is it?
That's right. No, and distillers are interesting. Distillers, one of the things you can get through a distiller that's fascinating to me is the tiny little asbestos fibers. So if you live someplace where you've got asbestos in your water, guess what? All along Lake Superior, then you couldn't really trust a distiller because.
Let me ask you. I know you're an expert in water, but let me ask you a question. I'm sure you don't know the answer. Do you know? This is one I'm sure you don't know, because I know lots of little minutiae. Did you know what a hydrocarbon is very common in water that distillation absolutely won't take up?
I would guess methane.
JP8 jet fuel.
Jet fuel. Sure.
Jet fuel. And I was JP8 jet fuel. Believe it or not, when the plane has too much fuel, it has to dump it up in the upper atmosphere at 20, 30, 40,000 feet. That vaporizes in the upper atmosphere, comes down in the rain, and it goes through the biological cycle that we call the rheological rain cycle. And guess what? JP8 jet fuel is not removed in the distillate. Happy jet fuel, if you're using a distiller or any other system other than the pure water system, you're taking jet fuel.
Well, this is, and people don't realize, you can control water. The great thing about water is you can control your drinking water. You can't completely control the food you eat, because guess what? That jet fuel rains down on your garden, rains down on the soil, rains down in the lake, the river, the stream. It's in the atmosphere. You can't control the air you breathe completely. You can't control the food you eat completely. You can control your water by putting a pure water system in your house. What we call a point-of-use water purification treats the water right before you use it. You can't get a more effective system right before you use the water to take out everything. So there's one place you can exert control.
And the great thing about that is we're going to break. What's the code we use in order for them to get 10% off? It is
Nutrimed. Nutrimed.
And if you want to contact Bob directly, it's 503-631-7712. 503-631-7712.
And toll free 866-444-9926.
And welcome back. And we have to read here, and our Cardiovasc is flying off the shelves. That's the new name for Cardivite. Cardiovasc, by the way, has the ginkgo biloba, which is an American product. The Canadian does not have ginkgo by regulation. There's no change in the formula. It is Cardivite. Cardiovasc It even has the same red bottles, so the next batches come out. We still have some Cardivite left, but it's basically the same product. We have the same power, by the way. When your dad, Sam Ibrahim, developed it, the capsule is equivalent to the drops. Do not get second best. Do not get knockoffs like Heart and Body, Strauss Heart Drops, Extendivite, all the other so-called garbage Me Too copy nutraceuticals. If you want to increase microperfusion, you want to protect your blood vessel walls, you want to perfuse your brain, heart, kidneys, you want to protect against kidney loss if you're a diabetic, you want to make sure you don't develop clots, you don't want to end up with microcirculatory problems causing you to lose your toes if you're diabetic, you want to not get peripheral neuropathy, CNS problems, so many other things can happen to you if you don't have proper perfusion. And I raise these questions, and of course, I like to ask people questions. You know, I'm like a bad 3-year-old, only I'm 63 now. And I realize, I always felt average. I never felt really smart. But I realized that there's no such thing as a stupid question. And so a lot of time when I was younger, I think when I was a little kid, I was thinking, why do adults act like it's a stupid question because they don't want to answer it? Well, here's some questions for you cardiologists and doctors out there. Does your heart pump the blood back to your heart? No, it can't. It only pumps the blood from your right atrium to your right ventricle. It comes down to the valve, and your right ventricle out to your lung field. It's your blood vessels that pump the blood back to your heart. It's the blood vessels that actually, the primary wave of your contraction of your left ventricle, that the secondary wave of your contraction of your blood vessels, and the peristaltic wave, which is metabolic, supported by Cardivite, CoQ10, Vascu Care, Gamma E+, magnesium glycinate, magnesium taurate, forskolin, that restores normal mitochondrial function, which is 60% to 75% of the dry weight of your heart, and more than 65 to 70% of the dry weight of the muscular intramural layer of your arterioles, your vascular bed, and then, of course, even the metabolic activity of your capillaries that don't have a muscular wall, determines what's called the peristaltic waves that push blood around your circulatory system. And if you're not taking Cardivite, all hypertension is, and this is the definition. By the way, this should be in medical books, but it's not. So if you're listening and you're a doctor or nurse, hypertension is the compensation of your heart's perception of decreased perfusion. Now, here's the danger. If you can just decrease the numbers because you're treating not the patient but their numbers, you lower their blood pressure, but you actually may catastrophically lower their tissue perfusion. And they proved this last year with the American College of Surgeons, that if you lower someone's pressure over 160 or 90 over 60 years of age, you could catastrophically cause renal failure, dementia, or put them into a serious state of congestive heart failure. So the fact is, perfusion is not the same as blood pressure. Treating blood pressure is not necessarily increasing perfusion. Taking Cardivite will increase perfusion, and when your body perceives that your perfusion is normalized, and it'll take a while for your body to compensate, but your body, along with total body magnesium up, improving mitochondrial function with our mitochondrial support with Vascu Care, mitocarnitine, mitochondrial catalyst, and CoQ10, guess what happens? Your heart says, hey, I don't need to push so hard and raise the blood pressure up because I'm getting secondary perfusion peristaltic muscular waves of your arterioles and proper nitric oxide production in the vessels, because my smart person who's taking those pills or those drops called cardiovasc are now improving the metabolic state to allow secondary wave perfusion of the body. Your heart doesn't pump the blood around your body, your blood vessels do. The heart is just a primary wave. And when you get this and understand that blood pressure is an indirect measure of perfusion. In fact, we're negotiating to bring over some devices from China, because the Chinese are far more advanced. There's also a company out of Houston that developed a device for doctors with 7 universities here in California to actually measure perfusion. They actually have a perfusion device. It's quite expensive. It's about $17,000. I like to see it miniaturized so you have it on your iWatch or iPad or iPhone. So what you do is you clip it on your finger and boom, it'll tell you if your perfusion is good. That's a better action and a better measure, just like the old capillary Blanche test and the idea of thinking that if my blood pressure is good, I'm good to go. No, you're not. Your doctor that thinks controlling your blood pressure and giving you toxic cholesterol-lowering drugs is going to make you healthy, he is an idiot or she's an idiot. They do not understand the physiology of what is blood pressure and what is perfusion, and they aren't the same thing. What do you think?
It's typical of treating the symptoms, not the cause. That,
well, the problem is I discovered a long time ago, and I was selected to do a PhD in nuclear physics at MIT, and then Dr. John Woodbury wanted me to be a senior resident and find the cause of autoimmune rheumatoid arthritis and other diseases like ankylosing spondylitis. And other times I realized I just am like a really inquisitive 3-year-old. I just haven't grown up. And I want answers to these darn questions, even if I irritate people, including myself. I have what's called 3 copies of the Never Rest gene. And what I have to understand, people, is these are really simple questions. When you ask the questions, how does their blood get back to the heart doesn't pump it back. And if you don't support your heart or your blood vessel metabolism, you don't get neutralized and get rid of heavy metals. You don't get rid of things like bisphenol A that interfere with CoQ10 metabolism. You don't support the mitochondrial function in the heart and blood vessel walls. You don't support nitric oxide and tetrahydrobiopterin and the production of the metabolic support of circulatory perfusion. How the heck do you expect to make people well? You can't. And again, like any fuel and engine, every cell in the body requires oxygen, they require nutrients, and they have the removal of toxins, heavy metals, and things that interfere with mitochondria. So if you look at this systematically, the entire medical profession are completely off the rocker. They really are. And yes, there are some drugs that are appropriate, like ACE receptor blockers and diuretics, but even you have to understand whenever you take these drugs, including beta blockers, you interfere with CoQ10 metabolism, mitochondrial function, and you interfere with carnitine metabolism. Cardivite does the opposite. It actually balances your autonomic nervous system, supports your microcirculation, prevents cholesterol oxidation, removes heavy metals and mitochondrial toxins. So returns, in fact, we have people who have had heart attacks and they start their cardiovascular after they've had a heart attack or after they've had a diagnosis of blocked artery, and their heart wall motion studies on a CT scan or a transesophageal echogram return to normal. And people say, how'd that happen? And it's really, I get a kick out of these doctors. They won't call me, even though their patient will say, well, my doctor's puzzled, and say, well, yeah, I don't understand, but whatever you're taking, keep taking it. They don't want to call and find out that they're just plain stupid. And there's no such thing as a stupid question, but when a person sees the obvious and won't raise the next question of why is this patient getting better or recovering from something, or why is their heart wall and their damaged cardiomyocytes returning to normal because they're taking Cardiovasc, don't you think that you doctors out there might actually wake up and smell a coffee and realize you don't know how to treat patients? I learned, they keep on practicing medicine because they never get it right. I learned that basically when I was trained by my medical colleagues and professors, these people were just plain, the word is, stupid. Okay? So if you want to get well, if you want to keep your circulation, you want a stroke or heart attack, you want to recover from your previous heart attack or stroke or microperfusion and you got kidney dysfunction, you need to be on Cardiovasc. And if you're not on it, why the heck not? Explain it to me, why? Take it today and stay well tomorrow. As I say, like Spock, live long and prosper. Back in a minute. The Nutrimedical report, a lot of people say, what is aging? In fact, I just saw a new research study on heterochromatin. Have you ever heard about heterochromatin before? Heterochromatin is proteins where you tightly wind DNA around this protein called heterochromatin, and when it's a little looser, the DNA kind of hangs out. Everybody's looking for kind of like a single kind of like factor, like telomeres or free radicals, or how long your telomeres are. So after you go through so many cell divisions, your telomeres shorten, which isn't really the true at all, because you have telomerases that you can reverse if you're developing cancer, or people with the long-acting genes called the FOXO2 genes. If you do a 23andMe, you can actually find that these people have long telomeres even if they're 100 years old, so their cells age a lot slower. The primary cause of aging, and I'm going to say this again and again so people understand, is what's called signal-to-noise ratio. That's a fancy, we call it engineering principle. And by signal-to-noise, we're not talking about regular signal-to-noise we call linear, or a unisignal like radio or television, where you get a scanned picture or you get an audio signal. We're talking about a parallel, what's called stochastic, parallel supercomputer programmed kind of cells where information is bidirectional. A lot of people think that DNA is unidirectional. It's wrong. Your cell membranes transmit signals to microtubules and RNA and other complexes that regulate the endoplasmic reticulum and the production of messenger RNA and structural and enzymatic proteins. So in DNA, you're actually making new code, just almost like you have a little programmer in your cells. Your cells and tissue are actually making new DNA code and new microtubules and new intracellular memory that's passed on even between generations. The problem is, when you're a fetus, you have lots of extracellular matrix, which are 8 classes of proteins, including matrix metalloproteinases, laminates, etc. And these materials act in 3 classes to attach to the cell membranes to translate what's called mazed scalar signals for infrared light of the vibration of biological molecules in solution. They're called phonon maser waves. And I presented this research 33 years ago to a panel of biophysicists explaining the biophysics of what living things are. What it means is every cell membrane has like little antennae that literally transmit signals to turn on and off your genes. And if you don't have that extracellular matrix, which fetuses have, you can't induce what's called apoptosis to get rid of old tissues. And I asked one of my hygienists this past Monday, and she's 7 months pregnant. I said, "What's the time at which?" She's a very smart lady. She did the best I call dental cleaning job, Janae, at Dr. Jeffrey Kerb's office in Escondido, the 3rd highest rated dental or biological dentists and cosmetic dentists in Southern California. And I said, "What's the time in which you get the greatest amount of cellular and tissue apoptosis?" And she looked at me like, "This is going to be a bad question, isn't it?" Yes. And the question is, it's when they're a fetus or a baby in utero, because your body's remodeling tissues. And one of the causes of aging is a lack of apoptosis, where you're not getting rid of old damaged senescent cells and replacing them in old damaged mitochondria. And guess what happens when you take Mountain Red Velvet? You rev the system up. You can make new cells, get rid of the old cells. It's almost like if you had an army and you never retired some of the old army guys. So some of them were in wheelchairs, some were blind, some were basically on feeding tubes, others were actually semi-conscious. But they're still in the army. And the fact is, if you don't retire them and replace them with young soldiers in their 20s, you're going to have a pretty ragtag army that can't really conflict with anything. And when you replace them with the young healthy cells, and that's what you're doing when you take Mountain Red Velvet. So
yes.
Tell us about your experience with Mountain Red Velvet. I mean, in other words, if you want a vigorous army, got to retire those old soldiers and put new ones in. And if you don't have Mountain Red Velvet, as I say, you're not a fetus, so take Mountain Red Velvet.
Exactly, and that's the whole process of taking Mountain Red Deer Velvet. Is it's for regeneration, it's for healing. It really does take an issue that's in the body and say, let's fix it. So that old sports injury, that creaky joint, that sore back, and that when we take Mountain Red Deer Velvet with 396 active ingredients in there, it really does heal the body. As you say, it's a whole process of regeneration.
Right, we know exactly. In fact, I'm putting my paper together, which I hope to have ready in the next month, and I'm going to present it in Las Vegas. This will unravel what aging and disease is. This will change the history of medicine on this planet forever. It's the completion of my work that I started back in the early 80s. I held back on releasing it because I knew they'd weaponize it. But I'm going to release it because I want doctors to challenge this theory. Again, whenever you put a theory out in mathematical equations, it means challenge it, prove me wrong, prove me right, but move the science of medicine and healing and what a cell and tissue is, and what is aging, what is a disease. When your joints go and you say, it's like I remember an old cartoon that was in Dr. John Woodbury's offices where we did research in rheumatology in the 70s. It said, "Doctor, how come you say I need to have an injection in my right knee? The left knee is just as old, and it's fine." You know, and the person had rheumatoid arthritis, right? So the fact is that when you have a damaged tissue or joint, it's not how damaged or how much toxins you have, it's how fast the repair is. If you have pit stops, for example, in a high-speed race like the Indy 500, and you have the pit stop crew is really good, it doesn't matter how many tires you blow as long as they can put new tires on. It doesn't matter how many engine valve lifters things go kaflooey, or you need to change the cylinder heads, you change them. And when you change them, the car goes boom, boom, and you're back out on the racetrack. The problem is aging is that when your body doesn't have the building blocks to rebuild your tissues, when you don't have the epigenetic signaling, when you get biotoxins that interfere with enzymes, when you get demineralization, that's why we use other things like NDMEs and microdose, which is growth hormone, and collagen max and tendon mender and joint performance. We're literally giving you the, as we say, and we talked about this with Dr. Bob Dennis, who'll be on, the signal and the substance. The substance is you need the epigenetic signaling and the building blocks. 396 biomolecules, 6 hormones. I mean, when you start taking Mountain Red Velvet, and I have a bottle sitting in my desk, so what I do is I'll take a capsule, open it up, and put it under my tongue, and like a Shakespearean speaker, or I call it, I can talk with one of these under my tongue. Two, forget it. But I open them up under my tongue, and I can still talk on air. So, but what people should realize is that we are unraveling I call the anti-aging, the zero senescence singularity. We're unraveling the very nature of what disease is. We're unraveling with science the fact that human beings can't be exposed to 10,000 toxins, depleted minerals, radiotoxins, stack vaccines, and expect to be healthy. We are not cockroaches.
And as you say, let's start the process. So there's no better start than with Mountain Red, because it does contain the building blocks. So if the body has all of those nutrients and proteins and growth factors on board, it's able
and it's
to
not just
heal
joints. A lot of times people think, "Oh, it just means I'm not going to have creaky knees." No. It means your brain's going to work. It means your heart's going to pump because you're going to regenerate heart muscle and you're going to get out of congestive heart failure. It means your kidneys are shot and you're trying to reduce the leakiness of the glomeruli, and you're taking vein away and ultrathymine B1. Now you're taking Mountain Red Velvet. You're actually rebuilding the kidney substance. So you're actually regenerating along with things like Nutrifos and Neurogen, so you get the phospholipids. As you take these building blocks, your body says, I can do this. The body is literally high-fiving you, say, I can do this. Absolutely. I can rebuild the kidney. I can rebuild your brain so you can actually remember where your recipe cards are and your golf scores and all the sport teams. And you can remember things so you can play chess with your children and grandchildren. And see, where I see... Yeah, I bet you do. And you probably have people suffering from various nasty... They're taking disease-modifying drugs for things like ankylosing spondylitis, and I think, isn't it your dad had ankylosing for years?
Yes.
Started on Mountain Red Velvet, and his ankylosing spondylitis, which is a nasty disease. I did research on this. Ankylosing spondylitis, and it went away. Isn't that amazing? It's like, without the toxic disease-modifying drugs that can make you pick up pathogens from your pets, screw up your stomach, cause you go into heart failure or give you cancer, guess what? Mountain Red Velvet will do none of those things. Get it today, as I say. If you want to photocopy yourself into the future, and if you realize you're not a fetus, take Mountain Red Velvet today and forever. For many future years. Thank you, Karen. Hope it was fun.
Sorry, we dropped off in the middle there.
That's a problem. No problem. We'll be back in a second. Stay right there. We'll get you booked up for next week. Back. All set? Do we have Dave Mitchell? Yep, let's go. Yes, Dave Mitchell. Do we have Dave Mitchell ready to roll? That's unfortunate. Well, I guess what I'm going to do then, I'm going to go into some issues talking about lots of interesting news that I've just pulled up that I think people need to know about. Of course, we have Jade Helm going on, and the Texas governor, of course, brought out the Texas Guard. Jade Helm basically is a psyop against the population to frighten preppers, and basically, I think, bring it on. The Obamacare is a call to physicians to get real and start becoming pro-life, and actually the only candidate that I support that will do the proper things for Obamacare, our foreign policies, etc., is Dr. Rand Paul. I 100% support him, and I challenge anybody out there to say, so why not to support Dr. Rand Paul? Yes, we need to get him to speak more clearly on specific issues, but I've had to, and we're working hard to try to get people. We posted up on Tuesday all the phone numbers in Kentucky and his national office in Washington, D.C. to get him on the air. I think we can do it, and when we do, we want to get tough questions so we can get the force of momentum moving behind Dr. Rand. All the other candidates, as far as I'm concerned, are a distraction. The entire Democratic Party is dangerous and completely out of their mind. The Democratic Party are dangerous to the future of America and the world. So we need to understand that, and many Republicans are sellouts as well, and then many are just distractions, such as Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, etc. So if you think otherwise, by the way, in the third hour today, coming up, we're going to have Professor James McCanney, along with our scientist, Ann Morrison. Every hour is an open question hour. There's no such thing as a stupid question. You may not like the answer, but there's no such thing as a stupid question. I will not embarrass you. I'll just try to teach if there's something that needs to be clarified. As I say, if I don't have the answer, I'll give you a framework for the answer immediately. It doesn't matter what topic, what issue, whether it's geopolitical, spiritual, genetic, metabolic, toxicological, environmental, geoengineering. I will give you an answer to any issue, anytime, instantly. And you need to understand the reason why we do this is we're trying to get the public moving toward getting tougher to ask better questions and be willing to kind of face the fact that we, in the past, have accepted questions that have been told to us by our teachers, our churches, our legal organizations, our medical organizations, etc. And it's not just a problem in America, it's in every nation on earth, but there's a different disease or presentation of that illness everywhere. And we're trying to present answers. Let's look at some of the news. The first thing is scientists find a chemical clue on obesity in urine samples. They've identified chemical markers that are linked to body mass, offering clues about people who are obese. Interesting findings. Of course, we talked about these chemicals known as metabolites that are present. They can analyze. They found that 29 different metabolic products whose levels correlate with a person's body mass index. 29. That's a lot. Let's look at some of the other Chinese and U.S. researchers' real key driver of human aging. So there's researchers here in China and the U.S. have been working on premature aging, and as we talked about this with heterochromatin, really interesting, with Guang Hui Lui at the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and researchers here in America that have been working on this research at the Salk Institute here in California. And what they've discovered is this thing called heterochromatin, a thing called Werner syndrome. So more talk about that, about anti-aging. And that's what's called the relaxed DNA or heterochromatin changes that are occurring. We also want to talk about some of the news issues that are going on. Changes in blood can predict cancer in advanced stages, years in advance. Cancer is not a mutation. It's an adaptation to stress. And as I said before, the problem that we've approached cancer in the past, the best cancer treatment I've seen so far is a combination of our complete Nutrimed line, malignant arrest to stop the metabolism, malignant block, ellagic acid, high-dose Power C, full vitamin K2, Inflamex, cell defense, anti-inflammatories, cell defense, of course, Nutri-Defense to build up your immune system surveillance to attack the tumor, etc., Mycel D3, Myco D2, etc. And when we use a granulocyte therapy, which is basically to pull a particular type of white cell out from a first-degree relative that's blood matched and tissue type matched, give it to the person with cancer, it'll go after and find and kill the tumors. I do not recommend chemotherapy unless it's gene-based cancer therapy. It's quite expensive. The best facility is a Brzezinski clinic. They use a lab in Cambridge, Massachusetts for gene testing. Augmentation therapy can be mild hyperbaric oxygen, significant alkalization, and there's clinics that I refer to in Mexico that can do the granulocyte therapy, intravenous Laetrile, and the immune vaccines against the cancer. They take a cancer sample and they can create an immune vaccine for you to have your immune cells activated to kill the cancer. A Liberian woman appears to have contracted Ebola through sex with a survivor. This is what we've been warning all along. It's becoming a sexually transmitted disease. Pretty nasty. And we have in Colorado a pit bull is patient zero in Colorado's case of plague. So they've actually had a release of now a plague that started with a pit bull and spread, I think, to 4 or 5 people. Nasty. The latest information, of course, going on Drudge is interesting. The cop was charged, one cop charged with murder. I think 5 more cops were charged with some lesser charges of manslaughter. I think people need to understand what's really going on is we have a number of problems. The first thing is the inner cities are breaking down. 83% of black children are born with fatherless families. We have a drug culture which is destroying and eating away at the culture of the population. We have unrestrained youth that have no role model. Then we have cops that are turning into thugs and are further trained, many of them returning from stints overseas where they use urban warfare tactics of foreigners and treat them like animals and kill them in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they come back to America. And they're told by their cop organizations, now they're becoming federalized, to use Bearcats and body armor and weapons and tactics that don't show respect for the public. They go to called lethal weapons immediately rather than using non-lethal weapons, and so they don't have respect. And again, if the governed, which is us, which has the sovereign authority to give authority to our police and our legal officials of the Congress, Senate, and the local town council, police, etc., if they don't have the respect of the public, they cannot police them. And the problem is that what the government wants to do is increase this danger. Increase this danger so they can actually further police us, like the movie Chappie that came out a month ago, where they have robotic, artificially intelligent police officers operating in South Africa and Johannesburg. This is where it's all going. Drones, Taser Corporation, they get you with a taser bolt, and even a program with autonomous, partially artificial intelligence, so they don't need a driver or at a distant site operating these drones. They'll actually make an autonomous decision whether they should hit you with a lethal or non-lethal weapon. A taser bolt hit hundreds of yards away based on a terahertz scan and identification, which can identify your bone structure more accurate than facial scan or iris scan. The use of steerable bullets, the use of high-energy, directed energy weapons, etc., such as the tunable pulsed mazed microwave weapons that can cause seizures, cardiac arrest, or unconsciousness at a great distance. And if you think they don't have these, I can give you the specific technical details of how they can do them and how they actually make these devices. So for all those people out there, including the government that's listening, I am on a rampage, and I'm going to release as much classified information or technology as I possibly can before the last breath and oxygen molecule leaves my body. And I'm protected by the Most High God with your prayers out there, so we're going to tell you the truth. And you need to know, when we talk about these things, which we're going to really get into in the next hour with Professor James McKinney and Ann Morrison, this program is like none other on this network or anywhere else. You're going to hear information deeper, farther, wider, and further down the rabbit hole than you'll hear anywhere on Earth, with solutions. It starts off with solutions of seeking the will of the Most High God, doing the right thing for a constitutional republic, returning to the idea of the sovereignty of citizens made in the image of the Creator. It returns to the basis of why America was great. As de Tocqueville said, America is great because America is good. Is America good anymore? Not so. Back in a moment with Hour 3. Professor McKinney hopefully will connect by Skype. He's overseas. And Morrison. Your questions are welcome. 800-259-5791.